Welcome to E Squared Emporium for all things AP Psychology. Today, we're beginning learning, also known as behaviorism, Part 1, Classical Conditioning. So, the behavioral perspective is about what we can actually see. Early behaviorists said, I don't know what you're feeling, and I don't know what you're thinking, because none of that can be observed. It's kind of mysterious, it's unseen. But what we can see is your behavior. So we can observe behaviors, anything that we can actually see. So learning is a change in behavior because we can see your behavior and we know by your behavior if you have learned as a result of the experience or the environment that you're in. This could be an increase in a behavior we want to strengthen or a decrease in a behavior we'd like to go away. So, for example, you could learn to play the piano louder or softer. You could learn to dance faster or slower. That's a behavior that we can see. Most of classical conditioning is also known as association learning because we have made an association. It's fairly passive learning. We have just associated two things that seem to go together. So, two or more things are paired together in time and space, and we make a connection. So, for instance, salt and pepper are usually paired on the table at a restaurant. So, if you see salt, you may think, oh, I forgot to use pepper. Some of the examples here in the picture, there was a study done with snails where every time the snails had water poured on them, they then received an electric shock. And the sea snails, eventually learned that the tail shock and the water became an associated event. Your dog may associate going in the car to going to the vet. So do you take your dog for a ride anywhere else other than the vet? So the dog may not like the car, may not like to see the car keys, may not like the leash. He's made an association. So we call this classical conditioning, a type of associative learning. It requires an unconditioned stimulus, and that learning is a neutral stimulus, but after a while, it will produce a response. So again, classical conditioning is fairly passive. It's kind of happening to us without us always realizing that it's happening. So what is acquisition? Acquisition is when we gain a new response, basically. It involves repeated pairings of the conditioned stimulus and the unconditioned stimulus, and we continue this repeated pairing. The greater number of pairings, we call them trials in the experiments, the greater number of trials, the stronger the conditioned response. So the more times you do this with your dog or your rat or your pigeon, the closer you're going to have a conditioned response and the faster you're going to have acquisition. So the first few trials produce the greatest rate of learning. And then after that, it kind of starts to dim down. Think about when you're trying to teach your dog to give you a paw. The first couple times are super exciting. He wants to give you the paw. Here's my paw. Have my paw. But after you've asked for it 20 times, the dog is bored and he's going to go do something else. So unconditioned stimulus and response, let's put these together. UCS to UCR. The unconditioned stimulus is a stimulus that triggers a physiological, which is a biological body reflex. So salivating when you get to the cafeteria and you smell the food. You can't help that. You can't stop it. It's going to happen when you're hungry. Eye blinking. You can't stop it. You can't help it. Your eyes need to blink. The UCR, the unconditioned response, is unlearned. It's innate, meaning you're born with it. It's involuntary, meaning you really can't stop it. It is a physiological, again, meaning a biological reflex. It is elicited, meaning it's brought out by that unconditioned stimulus. So, for example, a car backfires and you jump. Maybe you squeak a little. A really loud noise like thunder, lightning, it could cause you to jump. That is a natural biological response. So the unconditioned stimulus and response in an example, the way we think about it, How do we know if the behavior is the unconditioned response? It's usually a reflexive behavior. It's usually biological. It's something that probably even babies would do. It's usually something that did not require training in order to do it. Like you don't need training in order to sweat when it's hot outside. If it's hot outside, you're going to sweat. That is a natural response. A loud noise, like I just gave the example, is going to cause you to jump in fear. Placing food in your mouth or smelling food could cause you to salivate. If somebody blows in your eyes, you're going to start blinking. So now we move on to the conditioned stimulus and response, known as the CS and the CR. The conditioned stimulus is a stimulus that now elicits a conditioned response. So you learn to associate this new conditioned stimulus with the unconditioned stimulus. You start to associate that. So let's give an example here. Your dentist wears really strong aftershave, and you've been sitting in there. Maybe you've been going in every week for some kind of painful root canal. So you're smelling this strong aftershave every time you're dreading going in there, and you're associating it with pain, and you're associating it with being really tense. Now, that is a naturally occurring condition, but it has been happening over and over again, and now you're conditioned to it, and you're conditioning fear and pain to the smell of the aftershave. So now your boyfriend starts to wear the same aftershave, and you suddenly feel really tense sitting right next to him, and you feel really stressed, and you're not quite sure why. So note that the UCR and the CR are typically the same thing, right? So like the aftershave may be the same in both conditions, or the fear may be the same in both conditions, but one is the one you've started to make the new association to, right? So they occur in response sometimes to different stimuli. There are rare cases in where they're different, but usually one or both will be the same. So here's another example. You repeatedly use a scented hand sanitizer. That's the unconditioned stimulus. It's just sitting there on the shelf. No one's trying to make you use it, but you use it every day right before you eat lunch. And so now when you smell hand sanitizer, it's now become the conditioned stimulus. And now it elicits drool and salivation, the conditioned response. All right, so it was the UCS, and now it's the CS. Because you used it so often, you're now conditioned that when I use the hand sanitizer, it means I'm about to have lunch. Or you experience a very frightening event one night, and now you develop a fear of the dark. So the frightening event, the unconditioned stimulus, and now you develop a fear, a conditioned response of the dark, which was the conditioned stimulus. Now it's dark every day, it's dark everywhere at night. That is a naturally occurring event, but now you have associated it with something really scary that happened. Timing does matter. So how fast we put those two things together, the strength of the conditioning. So in other words, do you use the hand sanitizer and then eat within the next 10 minutes, right? If your dog makes a mess on the rug, you only have about 3 seconds to explain to him that that is not where he's supposed to go potty. If you like wait until it's the end of the school day or the end of the work day and then try to have this conversation with your pet, he has no idea what you're talking about. He went potty 5 hours ago and he does not have any connection to what you're saying right now. Think about it for you. If you bring home all straight A's on your report card, do you want to wait a month before you get to celebrate it? Or do you want it celebrated that night, right then? Look at my report card. Let's have ice cream right now. So conditioning we see, particularly for animals, is best when it's about a half second. And a half second is not very long between the time that they do the correct behavior and you give them the reward, or they do the correct behavior and you give them a pet, right? So we want to have that timing very close together. Now, a neutral stimulus is a stimulus that still causes the response. It's something we saw, it's something we heard, it's something we smelled, but it doesn't necessarily produce the reflex being tested. In other words, there's no meaning until we pair it with something. So many things in our world are neutral, but we've had an experience with them and now we've made them mean something. So like money is actually pretty neutral. It's just pieces of paper that we agree to use as trade, and it's got some ink printed on it, and every country has it with different pictures on it. It's a fairly neutral thing, but we put so much emphasis on it. And what we think about money either makes money good or evil, or we don't have enough, or money makes the world grow round, or money doesn't grow on trees, or I wish we had more money. It's our thoughts about money, but money itself is just a piece of paper. The same thing with light. Light isn't good or bad. Light is just light. But maybe we hate the light first thing in the morning because we don't want to get out of bed. Or maybe we want the light late at night because we're trying to still get work done. It's our feelings about it that make it one way or another. Most of nature is pretty neutral. A thunderstorm is pretty neutral. Most noise is pretty neutral. Smells, foods, I use the example of the dog leash, right? The dog leash is a neutral item, but your dog either associates excitement, we're going for a walk, she's picked up the leash, I'm very excited, or the dog sees the leash and hides under the bed and says, I'm not going to the vet because the dog associates something very negative. But the leash itself starts off as neutral. Music can be neutral until we give it meaning. Lunch is neutral until we give it meaning. Natural is similar, but it's something that occurs naturally. It's something that occurs biologically. It's something that occurs in nature. It's a cue that reliably precedes a biological event. You can't really control your pupils dilating. You can't really control that knee tap reflex when you go see the doctor and they tap your knee. You can't really control lightning and thunder. Your heartbeat racing, your nervous system, the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system, how you feel after you've just run a marathon. Those things occur naturally. And again, they're probably neutral, most of them. It's just what we associate to them. So there's neutral and there's natural. Let's look at some real world applications that might help us. So, how are we going to use classical conditioning? Why do we care about it in psychology? Well, it's used for advertising and marketing. Every single ad that you see on social media and on TikTok and on TV, it has all been carefully placed there using classical conditioning. We are all being classically conditioned all the time. So they use certain music, they use certain photographs, they want you to feel a certain way, they want you to associate their clothes with a certain vibe. They want you to associate their food with a certain feeling, right? Drink Coca-Cola, feel happy, drive our car, feel cool. Now, social media definitely uses this. They are manipulating us all the time. They are encouraging our addiction through classical conditioning. They know exactly what they're doing. There's a great documentary on Netflix called The Social Dilemma where they show you exactly how they do it step by step. How do they get you to push like and heart and thumbs up? And it is all carefully crafted. So you better believe we're being manipulated just like rats in a maze. We use classical conditioning in education and childcare. And since the very first day you went into daycare, your teachers have been using this. Animal training, dog training, zoo training, even horse and livestock training. And we use it in psychology to treat phobias and anxiety, which we'll be looking at. Let's take, for example, a real world example of morning coffee. Maybe you or someone you know has to start their day with coffee, either iced latte or hot coffee. So the smell of the coffee is neutral. It's not good or bad. The unconditioned response is that you don't have any alertness or excitement. The natural stimulus is that you're starting to have anticipation for the day ahead. The natural response is alertness and excitement about that. The conditioned stimulus is the aroma. So now you've conditioned yourself that when I smell that, it means I'm about to go to school or I'm about to go to work, and it means something is about to happen. And the conditioned response is alertness, excitement, maybe stress for the day ahead. Another example, your smartphone. How often does our smartphone go ping, 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 ping? And those notifications make our hearts pump with excitement and or stress. Could be that you don't want a response from someone, or you're waiting for a response from someone, or you're dreading a response from someone. So the neutral stimulus is the notification sound. Our phones are neutral. It is what we place on our phones that makes them good or bad. And all of those sounds and all of those apps, we put them there. We did that. The unconditioned response is that we don't have any emotional reaction to it. The natural stimulus is something that triggers an emotional response. And the natural response is the emotional response: stress, excited, don't want to read it, have to do it right now. The conditioned stimulus is the notification sound. So now we start to hear bing, 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 and you either get stressed or excited. And that's the conditioned response, the emotion that you feel every time your phone vibrates or makes a ping or makes a noise. Another example, your alarm to wake up in the morning. Traffic lights, what does red versus green mean to you? Going to a familiar place, maybe someplace your family used to always vacation and there's nostalgia in going there. Listening to a movie soundtrack that you love, like Harry Potter, Star Wars. Retail therapy, going to the mall and seeing shoes on sale and clothes on sale and they're just your right size. What is that excitement? What does that feel like? Fear and horror movies, boy, they know exactly how to get to us with the jump scare and the soundtracks. That is a skill. They practice classical conditioning in every single horror movie. And that chilling music is designed just to create the palpitation and the fear. So extinction means we have gradually weakened the response and will eventually disappear of the conditioned response. So if you stop rewarding a behavior, the behavior will become extinct. If you stop giving your dog a treat every time your dog gives you his paw, your dog will stop offering you his paw eventually. If you use the can opener and it doesn't mean that you're going to give your dog any wet dog food, your dog will eventually stop drooling to the sound of the can opener, right? So that's an example of extinction. So what if you stopped receiving praise from a teacher or a coach or a parent? Would you stop caring about your performance if everyone was just like, yeah, whatever? And what if you stopped getting grades? Would you stay up all night doing your homework if there was no grade? You weren't going to receive a single grade, not on a test, not on a quiz, not on anything. It would go extinct. Doing homework would go extinct. And by the way, not doing their homework is why the dinosaurs went extinct. I believe it because I read it on TikTok. Right, spontaneous recovery, a previously extinguished condition response suddenly reappears again. So spontaneous recovery can only occur after extinction had occurred. So you think that you got rid of a particular behavior and then suddenly it's back. So let's look at some examples. You used to be afraid of dogs. You went to a lot of therapy to get over your fear of dogs, and it worked for a very long time. You were not afraid of dogs. But now you're out in the dog park and you're there alone, and someone's aggressive dog is running towards you, and suddenly the fear returns. Now it's going to be weaker than before, and it's going to extinguish or go away faster than it did before. But all of a sudden, your heart was racing and you had that little blip of fear that you thought you were completely over. Another example we see commonly, a person gave up smoking, they gave up whatever their addiction was, drinking, binge eating, drugs, but they've had a very stressful week, a very stressful event has happened in their life, and they instantly go back to their old coping mechanisms. They instantly want to pick up that old bad behavior. Very, very common that happens. So you can see from this chart here, the original acquisition took a very long time, that first extinction period, but then there's spontaneous recovery after an event. But look at how small that second extinction period is. It's quicker, faster, smaller. Stimulus generalization means that we have generalized the stimulus to all things that are similar to the original stimulus. So the more similar it is to the original stimulus, the greater we are going to generalize. Let's look at some examples. It will make more sense. Let's say you were afraid of poodles, but now you're afraid of dogs that look like poodles. And eventually you might become afraid of all other dogs that are the size of poodles or have longer hair like poodles. Maybe you have a fear of one clown and you saw the Stephen King movie It, and now you're afraid of all clowns because you have generalized your fear of clowns. Maybe you had a really bad breakup and your ex liked Luke Combs, sorry Luke, and now you have generalized to all country music. Now it's all country music. You can't handle any country music. It drives you crazy. You have generalized. Maybe you had a bad experience with pasta and now you have generalized to all pasta. And we're going to look at Watson's little Albert experiment where he generalized, and you'll see an example there. The opposite of that is discrimination. It is where you're actually able to tell the distinct differences between similar stimuli and you don't have a response. Something similar does not trigger a response. So it is possible to teach an animal to only drool when they see a yellow circle, but don't salivate when you see an orange circle. And that slight distinction would be discrimination. Okay, this is the only time when discrimination is okay. Let's say a person develops a fear of large dogs after an attack, but they're still okay with small dogs. Small dogs are still okay, but they only have a fear against large dogs, and they can tell the difference. They can say, oh, you're that breed. Let's say, and everybody probably does this, what's your favorite restaurant in town? Think of your favorite restaurant in town. And why is that restaurant your favorite when several other restaurants in town serve the same or similar food, right? Think of all the Thai restaurants you could go to. Why is that one your favorite Thai restaurant? Think of all the Mexican restaurants you could go to. Why is that one your favorite Mexican restaurant? Think of all the Italian restaurants you could go to. Why is that one your favorite? Why is that your favorite coffee shop? You have discriminated that one of those is slightly above the others, even though they serve similar things. And now you are ready for the next video.